And good evening. It's December 14th, 2023. And we're continuing our discussions on The Chosen, created by Jenkins. So tonight, we're going to be exploring Season 3, Episode 6, Intensity, Intent City. Intensity, Intent City. During this series, my dad, John Warren, my brother, Jim Warren, and of course myself, are going to be having a discussion and reflecting on things that have impacted us along our way. So, welcome to the Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you find these kind of podcasts useful, then click the subscribe button. The reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think that these might be useful to others, that's when you click that like button, because that is the way that YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. So intensity at Intent City, right? So we have this opening dream sequence with this slithering snake wandering through the camp, as it were. Then we're introduced to Pontius Pilate's wife. Then a gruesome crucifixion. It's a pretty stark start with echoes of scenes to come.
Yeah.
So with that, gents, what's up?
Well, you mentioned the beginning, and I thought the snake slithering through, and then Jesus pops up, and it makes me think about the garden and ahead of it. But it just the intensity of it, as you said in the beginning, intensity of Tent City. It's stories within stories. There's a story, and it's leading to another story. It's hinting at another story. And I just, there's so much there that if we don't get through it, it wouldn't surprise me. But I liked the little interaction between Pilate and his wife. She had the dream. She didn't tell him about the dream. She just asked him some questions, and he, like we'll see later with Peter, he kind of just blows her off, and just so it doesn't make him feel too guilty or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the apostles are all sharpening their knife. They're getting ready for something. They don't know where Jesus is. They don't know what they're getting ready for. So they're preparing for what they think is going to happen. And that is going to be a battle down the road. And I think it's interesting as they're having this interaction, Matthew starts to defend Gaius. He's not a bad guy. And they're, so it's all of this mixture is going on of who are the bad guys and who are the good guys, and where are these people going to play later in Jesus's life. There's so much of that going on, and then Simon and his little he sees one of the guys that he used to be in the part of the zealots with. He sees him in the camp. He's got his hood up and he's covering up. And what's going on in his mind? What would be going on in my mind if I was there and I saw that? What else would I be bringing into the picture? And that's another part of these episodes that get me, is that it also applies to my life today. The same things I'm going through, the same kinds of stories. I had a discussion with a guy at church today, and it just I ended up telling him, I said, one of my things that I'm really interested in is The Chosen. She says, oh yeah, my wife watched that. I just started. but there are so many things that are relatable to what's going on in our lives today that the episodes seem to be getting more and more diverse and more intense.
Hmm.
So, Jim, what do you think?
It was an interesting beginning. First, when it was panning through and you see somebody laying on the ground, I'm like, okay, what happened? Somebody's dead, and then you see the other guys laying there and say, oh, okay, I think they fell asleep, and then of course Jesus and the intensity of Jesus, because he just pounds his fist on the ground. I was talking to my therapist the other day. We were talking about prayer, and he was saying in the mornings when he gets up and he goes to pray, he tends to fall asleep. And I said, I'm the actual opposite. In the mornings, I am awake, alert, boom, 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 mind going a million miles an hour. It's at night that I start getting drowsy if I want to pray. But it was like, it was reminiscent. Bob, I think you mentioned this before that we started the broadcast, that, we have certain, information about where the story's going, kinds of stuff. And, we know that there's going to be this garden scene where the disciples fall asleep and that. But like you were saying, Dad, it hit home for me. I don't want to fall asleep. I don't want to fall asleep on God. I want to be present, listening, ready, kind of thing. And it's funny because in the place where the disciples could do the most good, they're asleep. In the place where they can do the least good, they're sharpening their knives. It's like, guys, you need to flip that priority kind of thing, in terms of as you see what's going on. And it was interesting because all of them are sharpening, a fishing knife or a butter knife, kind of thing. And then it's like, what's Simon got? He's got why do you have a dagger? Why do you need a dagger? And of course we know why. And later on, we'll see the battle that's going on inside him when he meets up with some of the guys later. And we'll save that for potentially later in this episode or the next episode. But the only other thing I think that struck me, and I kind of had to go back and look it up and think it through. And it's like, there's nothing in scripture that says that Pilate was young or old.
Mm-hmm.
But in this episode, he's young. And I did not expect a young Pilate. I think I expected him to be older. And so that kind of threw me. And then I thought, well, he could very well have been young. And it was interesting the way they were portraying him. He was saying he's not a particularly ambitious guy. He's not like he's out to try to, do all kinds of things. And then you kind of go, okay, so what he was doing with Jesus makes a little more sense in terms of he's just trying to, keep the peace and status quo, because I don't want anything to change. I just want it to stay the same. I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything. And so Dallas did a good job of painting that picture for us down the road, but kind of laying the groundwork with how he's developing Pilate's character. So I thought it was a great opening.
Yeah. I'll buy. There's a bunch of characters in this as we go that are not what we might have expected them to be. The disciples fit in the middle, like they're not as old as a lot of the paintings that we have to be. Mm-hmm. I still expect them to be a little younger, but then again, choices that's fine. The other characters, we see them and we're looking at them, and some are characters that we're seeing that we, three of us think anyways, are going to show up later in a Bible story that we're just getting a glimpse of who they are now, because they're going to be interjected in a story later. Yeah. Pilate, I'll agree, is one of those little weird things where you're like, that's not what I expected. History lets us know kind of, in most of the people that are general Bible reader types, history isn't an interest, meaning they're not really thinking about, this actually took place in a time and a place with people that are not just Jewish. Right? There's something going on. Where's the Roman Empire in at this moment? What is the state? How are the fingers doing? Right? Mm-hmm. And Pilate wants the status quo. Yeah. He just wants it to run smooth. He does not. Prior to this, we had a bunch of unrest. We had some uncomfortable things. We had a Herod, because there are more than one, that decided to massacre all male children 2 years and under.
Right.
Okay. And that's within these people's lifetimes. Okay. So there's a lot of negative towards this land that Rome doesn't need. Okay. So they're looking for peace. It's not a shock. What's kind of weird is because we know the story, right? So we're the one writing the pictures into the pictures we're seeing, and we're going, oh, that could be this, that could be this, could be this. And you have the person that's having the dream that has no clue. She has no idea. Right. Because albeit that they've heard of this wandering preacher, this rabbi that is Jesus, right? They haven't seen him. They haven't heard him. They've heard of him. They haven't heard him. Unlike Joanna, that was working with John the Baptizer, right? John the Immerser. And so we have her actually hearing Jesus, at least in the story. She hasn't heard. Pontius hasn't heard. He doesn't want any trouble. So and so that segue from that scene in the crucifixion, so we get some foreshadowing. Yeah, we get some, and he's not comfortable with it. But his deal with it is, when is a good time to have executions? And it's a lighthearted but still true point. Those things, and then we segue into a field that we see then the disciples gathered, sharpening implements. They're sharpening size for the field. They're sharpening axes. They're sharpening things. But we get the hint as they're sitting around, this isn't about farm maintenance, right? We're not just sharpening things like, well, we're going to sit around and just get the tools ready. We do all this stuff, so we're just going to sit around and do this. That's not what's going on in their minds, because it could be. It could have been. If you don't know and you're walking up looking at him, you go, because the only guy that's really doing anything, the dagger, is Simon the Zealot. When they look and realize he's got a dagger, the rest of them are knife, axes, size, but they realize that they're preparing for something that they're thinking they are expecting.
Right.
They can't be further off.
Right.
They can't be more wrong. And they're having to work through being that wrong. Yeah. And it's interesting as you have them do, because you hear them walking through it and you almost want to say, guys, you're getting it wrong. Stop. Wait, stop. And of course, then the little thing about Matthew, well, I should be sharpening a knife. And nobody wants to give Matthew a knife. That's really funny. Nobody wants to get Matthew a knife. But what we do get is the first glimpse from Simon Peter of his developing care for Matthew, because he says, you have something sharper than a knife.
Yeah.
He's the one that steps up and says it, that it's your mind and your pen. And he proceeds to teach him how to stab people with a pencil, which I thought was funny, because there's no way it was going to happen. But he does make this point, and I liked that. I did. That we have, because he has not been a fan of Matthew.
Yeah,
he hasn't been. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And again, on a side comment that we've been talking about was the gospel message and biblical message overarching is this: love your enemy, right? And so we're getting glimpses of this in that as we see this story weaved out. Yeah.
Well, I think as they spend time together, they're starting to get to know each other a little bit,
Hmm.
and you get to know. Uh, I was talking, like I said, I was talking with somebody at church today, with in a study afterwards. I'd never met him before, and as we were talking, you're getting a feeling. I was getting a feeling for where he was coming from, and what he. Oh, I've never read that. Oh, I haven't read that. Those kinds of comments, and you say, well, that tells a whole different story. You might be leading the Bible study, but you're 35 years old, and I'm 80 plus years old, and so you just there's things that you discover, and I think it's really interesting, as Mary and Tamar get to talking. Why are you doing this? And they don't know how to. It's another thing that came up today is the eras that you're born in.
Hmm.
The era that I was born in, you just didn't talk about anything. That was, you said it, it happened. As being the adult male in the husband, the father, the whatever. And this we were talking about that today. And as you saw it in here, um, tomorrow she was saying, well, "What about your life?" As these two ladies were talking, and women didn't talk about life. They talked about taking care of the home. That was their job to do. And these women were talking about starting a business and learning how to take care of the earth around the trees and all the things. And it's as you're getting to know these characters, Bob, you have said many times, that Dallas has taken a lot of liberties with what he has, uh, stories that he tells. And we know that Mary and some of the other women, it says in scripture that they were the ones that were finding funds to support the ministry, so that they didn't have. This was before Paul and do your own thing and that, and this is the beginning of them. That's why I like this episode, because there's so many starts. Uh, Zebedee comes into the picture, and he's, what are you guys talking about? I thought they were fine, and you're getting to know they've been out talking to men that know soil. Zebedee knows how to fish. You go and you pick the stuff off the trees. Isn't that? I mean, that's what I would think. But if you don't prepare the soil properly, and so much of this episode goes in, starting those stories that are going to evolve. And I okay, somebody else talk. I'm sorry.
No, you're there. There's a lot in that, Jimmy.
Watching, it's funny. I was thinking the same thing to some degree. Of, I don't know that conversation would have taken place between Mary and Tamar in the same way that many years ago, because the culture was different. I think
Hmm.
the same thing with Peter and Eden later in the episode, although very poignant and very powerful conversation that I think was
Hmm.
not, what's the word? No, it might not have fit in that era, but it fit in the episode fine, and I liked it.
Hmm.
Um, but even watching Mary and Tamar just talk about the differences in their upbringing and the
Mm-hmm.
differences in their lives, and they both actually respected each other for different reasons, but were, because they were so different, it was hard to let that guard down and connect. And it wasn't until there were some hurt feelings that they started to let some of these things, come to the surface, and they could talk about it. And it was funny because it reminded me, listening to them, I don't know if you've heard For King and Country. They're a
Mm-hmm.
Christian group. I like these guys a lot. If you ever, to me, one of the best Christmas albums ever. So take a listen to their Christmas album. Sorry, that was a plug, but I don't get any money for it. But they have a song, I don't know what it's like to be you. You don't know what it's like to be me. We're all the same in different kinds of ways. Can't you relate? And it's like that we come from different places, but we're still human beings who have feelings, and that's what they were, beginning to connect with. And I loved that we see and I do believe that the gospel tends to start to do that in people. It opens us up to talk about real life rather than trying to put up these facades, and you begin to see this supposed arrogance that Tamar has. It's a protective layer for the damage that's been done because of the loss, a traumatic loss of her family. And she still has the necklace that has blood on it, kind of thing. And it's like, wow, now it's not just a, gaudy piece of jewelry. It means something. Mm-hmm. And so those things are what I believe the gospel begins to do, is open us up to each other. And I love to see that happen. And we're going to see more of that kind of stuff, I think, as we go on.
Yeah, we have, because their interaction, Mary and Tamar, and you watch the breaking down of this dynamic that, again, you're not sure that would have happened that same way then. And Jimmy, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But with us today, it fit not only in the story, but it fits with us today, especially the balance of what you share with what you share. In other words, you have two people that still need to share their stories. And part of that sharing, I wrote this down. These were three of the things that stood out to me with this series. It started with the men in this, but it trickled through the episode to me. These were the three words that popped out to me, and they were purpose, trust, and duty. Okay, those were three things that popped to me. So in the trust realm here, because Mary they do have a purpose chat, because they're looking at that stuff. But their deepest point and the biggest connection point, which allows them to move forward, is the trust issue. Yeah. Both of them have to meet some trust form. And it's not until one of them finally says, okay, I'll tell you, right? That that Tamar, and I find it intrigued me a little bit, because for me, the way the story was playing out, I would have thought that would come from Mary first. And it didn't. It came from Tamar. And then she shares her story. And then all of a sudden, you're right, that necklace that was so tritely mentioned a number of episodes, actually, all of a sudden, you almost have one of those moments where you go, because then you go, oh my gosh. And then you get emotional, and you go, oh my, and you're like, it's a reminder. It's a reminder of so much. And then you go, oh, I get it. And then you realize, boy, did I just chew on some shoe leather? Yeah. Did I just munch on a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't need to eat? Yeah. That taste is just, and so Mary realizes it. She backs off and shares a little bit. And all of a sudden you get the share thing. And then they realize that they're not so different, which, Jimmy, you were talking about. That's really the point, right? That we're not so different in this. And then, hey, let's take a trip.
Yeah.
Let's take a trip. I mean, I thought that was neat. Okay, let's get up and let's take a trip. And yeah, I can do that. And they go. And now purpose comes in, duty comes in as we go away, which, again, I really liked in this. So, yeah, that was very good, strong points. So the point that we'll start talking here, we'll see how far we can go with this. Gaius and Dominus have a meeting, and it's about the intensity in Tent City.
Tent City.
Okay. And it's interesting because it's a perspective thing. There's no intensity in Tent City.
Right.
Really. There's anticipation of when this rabbi is going to, because I don't think they really grasp that he's the Messiah. This is really not, we're not there yet. But they are definitely intrigued on the words of this rabbi. And they're waiting for him with bated breath. Gaius views it with, Dominus views it with disdain. It's almost the smell, everything infuriates him. You know what? When I need to picture this. So in The Matrix, there's one point where
I knew where you were going.
Yeah, see, where the agent is with Morpheus, and he's going, "I hate the stench of this place, the smell," and he's rubbing his head over Morpheus's sweat as he's sweating, and he's putting it up in his nose. And I'm going, it's exactly what Dominus is thinking about this tent city. And on top of the fact, I'm not making any money on it, on top of it all, because it's not chewing up his resources as much yet. There's not, unless he needs to post it, but disruption's not the problem, right? So there's a lot going on in that. And the reticence of Gaius to be overtly aggressive. Yeah. They're peaceful. He wants to leave them be. Dominus doesn't agree. Gaius is caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Well, he's looking through a political eye. Dominus is. It's totally political.
Mm-hmm.
It makes him look good or bad. And Gaius is starting to look at things through human eyes. And that is a no-no when you get to that role. So it just made me think of that.
Yeah, no, it does. Jimmy, Dad, I agree wholeheartedly, where we have a perception shift.
Well, and you see it, Dominus, it's an inconvenience to have this thing going on, like you said. And it's funny that he's been so domineering. He's been the powerful one, lording it over everybody else. And then all of a sudden you see him go, but I need Pilate's approval to have any advancement. And he realizes he's not the high man on the totem pole either. And so he wants everything to stay, to line up so that it doesn't mess up anything. And then Gaius, he's, like you said, he's looking at it from a human perspective. I think even from a maintenance issue, it's like they're not causing problems. And if we try to change anything, it will cause problems. So can't we just let it play out, and probably it'll dissipate and it won't be an issue. We also see there seems to be a little bit of curiosity on his part for this preacher. He's you see him kind of standing in the background watching, and who knows where this is going to go in terms of his character, but there is something personal for him besides just the relational, trying to keep the peace, I guess is the word.
Right. We have him strolling through Tent City. So he obeys his master, right? And he takes a stroll through Tent City. And but then when it comes to little corrections that Dominus had tossed out for a few things, and you're right, on the personal side, we see a shift. We see him, well, I'll just help them. And so he takes these personal goods, he helps them to a tent, he helps them move their cooking stuff. He just does some things that are very out of character for what you're expecting, because there's intrigue, and then which eventually strolls him to a scene. Yeah. And we'll get there when that shows up. But there's this development, and in it goes with the interaction with Simon Peter, because Peter even addresses it when he's walking around the cistern. You were talking to Gaius? He said, yes. we were fixing the water cistern, right?
Yeah.
So he defends his discussion with Gaius, which I loved, and the fact that we're fixing the water that that the town's drinking, and we had to do something. And I kind of liked his pushback a little bit, and then he's not such a bad guy.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He actually takes the advice that he gives him and tries it, which we know really didn't play out so well, but that's part of how it goes. And it's interesting. The inference to putting out fires that they have there. And I think we have this people are anticipating everything. Because don't forget the echoes, if you're listening to chitter chatter that's going across, people are going, and if people start to mention Messiah, they have a perception of who they think Messiah is.
Right.
And we go back to where we started this whole thing with sharpening knives, right? So there's wandering preachers are not causing problems. And this is the challenge they have, is that they're hearing some echoes of those kind of things, that little scatterbutt. We call it social media noise today, right? But the story that Jesus is living and showing them is not playing out.
Right.
There's not the trouble. There's not disruption. He's not causing revolt. Actually, what he's saying is the opposite. And they're confused. Atticus is confused. Gaius is confused. So much so that we get a brief intro with Atticus talking to
Pilate. Yeah.
And they discuss this very thing. He's not a problem, but I want to make sure it's not a problem. Yeah. And that the young guy, interestingly in this, Jimmy, you were talking about how young Pilate was also prepared to listen to the advice of an older. I found that interesting. You're right about things you didn't expect from characters. That was one thing that I didn't expect of the character. And I was intrigued by the story twist. We'll see how that builds up. So Dad, what did you, the Atticus Pilate meeting in this, he rides him out to nowhere with this pomp of Roman tent set up with slaves. And it was kind of funny, almost this comical setup in this setup. But Pilate sitting out there eating olives or grapes, right? Stuffing himself and talking. How did that, what out of that meeting where you went, interesting?
Well, first, what was the meeting about? It never really was clear to me what the meeting was about, except they hadn't seen each other in a year.
Well, it might have been a status update. Don't forget, he's there reporting to a Roman governor. He is in charge of the area. Pilate is. Everybody else is there in support of the governor. Again, as we mentioned, even Dominus needs the support of the governor. Pilate happens to be that guy.
That's I guess that's what I didn't know that. I do now. But what does that mean in their getting together? They only really talked about one thing, and that I remember, and that was Jesus. Is that the only thing that's happening in that city? And Pilate
only thing of care, only thing of concern. In other words, everything else is just noise. Atticus is very aware of what really matters. Atticus, okay,
that's what I'm saying. What they're talking about is one thing, and that is peace. They want peace. They don't want any kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So who's ever over Pilate, it's not Dominus. We know that. Who's ever over Pilate, that's what he wants. And he wants a different kind of peace. He wants everything to be peaceful. He doesn't want to come in with the heavy hand and slam down on people.
Mm-hmm.
Dominus doesn't care. He's got no class whatsoever, at least what I have seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
But Pilate, on the other hand, is light-handed, and he wants to help. He wants everybody to be happy. And when we're all happy, when I was involved in the ministry and we were opening up prisons, their whole concern was peace in the yard.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted peace in the yard. So
Mm-hmm.
anything that gave them peace in the yard, and that was one of the things that we brought, was with the wheelchair repair places, it brought peace. Well, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about they want peace. They want the people happy. They want
Mm-hmm.
everybody smiling.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get that from Dominus. Dominus wanted the same thing, but he didn't go about it the same way. Pilate was looking for ways for peace. Dominus was looking for ways that he can assert himself into power, which of course we know where Jesus is going with that.
Right. Flips that. Jimmy, any closing point with that?
Atticus is an interesting character. I still haven't got him fully figured out.
I agree.
He almost feels to me like it's kind of like they talk about, rich people. You don't know the really, really rich people because they don't want to be known,
Right.
And
Right.
people of power. There's the politicians, then there's the people behind the politicians that are really pulling the strings, and the power players.
Mm-hmm.
And Atticus feels like that kind of guy. It's like he's playing Pilate a little bit. He's playing Dominus a little bit. He knows, where to move things, but then he's got this Jesus person that he can't figure out. He doesn't play into the typical, how do you manipulate these guys and do things. And so I think he's confused by Jesus. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go with that, but he's that kind of guy who doesn't need the recognition. To me, Dominus is about, he wants the position. He wants the role, the glory. Pilate wants the status. I just want to just keep things the way they are. And Dominus is the one who I think he likes the power because he's able to kind of power both of them in different ways.
Oh, yeah.
But Jesus is not a power player, so he doesn't know what to do with him. And so I'm curious and anxious to see what happens with Atticus's character as the episodes roll on.
Yeah, Atticus is he doesn't have a column to put Jesus in. We have columns. I've been mentioning this on the enemy stuff and different things in the column, and he doesn't have a column to put him in. They keep trying to stick him in a column, and Atticus is saying he doesn't fit in that column. It doesn't. I'm an expert at that column.
Mm-hmm.
He's not it. However, he's something, right? He's not nothing. It's easy to take him out of the column and say he's not a troublemaker. He's not a rabble rouser. He's not looking to fuel people up in that way. But he's intrigued enough to know what he doesn't know, right? That gets him when we do this. Okay, so this is obviously going to take, this episode has so much in it, this is going to take multiple episodes. Minimum 2, I'm thinking closer to 3 is what we're going to have this with, folks. So I think we're going to have fun. So we have just talked about the opening few bits here with this. So we'll jump into let's leave with, we'll talk about a very lighthearted moment with a break-in with Leander and the disciples in the house. And I think if you've seen it, you're laughing at the same time. If you haven't seen it, please go see it, because it's a scene that's meant to give you tension, and then you realize it's anything but. So we're going to continue this with part 2 in 2 weeks, and we'll go with this intensity. This is fun, gents. So we'll bring it up. And thank you, folks, again for being with us tonight. Another episode of Sons of the Father on the Dusty Feet.